I'm going to keep this presentation short and have more time for Mridula for discussions. Change is the only constant, and we have seen transformational change in automobile sector in India, from horse cart and bullock carts to the future of zero-emission vehicles. I'm presenting some of the basic statistics that shows how India fare on the economic landscape with respect to the automobile. The industry contributes about 7.5% of the national GDP and about 49% to the manufacturing sector's GDP. It's the largest employing sector with about 19 million people directly or indirectly involved in the automobiles. India became the third largest automobile market in terms of vehicles sold. This figure is for 22-23. The country has produced over 25 million vehicles in FY23, and by 2030, the annual sales of EV is expected to reach about 10 million units. That will be almost a seven-fold increase from last year's numbers. Moving on to the Maharashtra, how it fares, it's the largest auto industry in India, contributes about 7% to the state's GDP. The state accounts for 20% of the total vehicle population, and not only vehicle population, but also large in the parts and accessories manufacturing. It has over 16,000 enterprises that are involved in manufacturing of automobile and auto components. 80% of these are micro enterprises, and 17 are small. So together they capture about 97, which is the major chunk of the enterprises in the automobile sector. Collectively, the automobile in Maharashtra employs about 0.34 million people directly. And our research in Pune indicates that there has been a significant number of informal workers which are associated with the sector, particularly MSME, that are not accounted for in the employment statistics. Pune is definitely the largest cluster and the manufacturing hub. It represents 41% of the enterprises, in Maharashtra. It also accounts for 54% of the workforce employment and direct employment in the automobile. Moving to the next slide, just a representation of how there's the distribution of the number of units and the workforce in OEMs and ACMs. I've already given you the statistics about the micro and small enterprises. ACMs, if you look at it, account for about 72% of formal employment. OEMs account for about 28%. If we look at the MSME sector as a whole, that has the major chunk of about 60% formal employment. And Pune, as I said, is the largest cluster with 54%. Maharashtra is also the front runner when we talk about electric vehicles. Maharashtra unveiled the EV policy in 2021. And if you see the jump in the next slide, just last year, it has actually surpassed India's average in terms of EV penetration to 7.6% from 0.4 in 2020. The state also accounts for about 12% of national EV sales. It has seen the highest sales of EV car of two-wheeler in the country, and also the second highest total EV sales in 2023. The segment-wide breakup is given. Two-wheelers account for maximum share, as is the trend in India, about 85%. A green transition will have impact on enterprises. It will also have impact on workforces. ACMs and OEMs will undergo a substantial modification in their assembly lines. There is a fundamental change in the technology, automotive technology, which poses a bigger challenge for the MSME sector, given their limited resources to adapt and integrate advanced electric powertrain technology. In terms of diversification, it has been seen that micro and small enterprises are often agile and able to adapt, while large and medium have already made heavy investments in plant and machinery and could have a bit of a challenge when it talks about diversifying into different powertrain components. Another key issue, and when I say issue, it could also be a larger opportunity, is in terms of our ability to meet the surge in demand with respect to electrical components. Do we have the capability, both technical and financial, to meet the demand of electrical components as it increases with the demand for electric vehicles? Transition to skilled labor for ICE powertrain components is, again, a big consideration. Fundamentally, the technology of powertrain and ICE vis-a-vis EV is very different, and the demand for skill will actually be moving from less mechanical to more of electrical. When we talk about the OEMs and the large enterprises, for them there could be a different a transitional issue with respect to reassessment of supply chains, bringing the battery and EV-related components have to be incorporated in their existing supply chain. Investments in skilling and reskilling will again become important at OEMs level because tier one auto component manufacturers are highly dependent on OEMs for skilling and training purposes. Service centers and informal shops, they will have a couple of transition issues. The nature of maintenance and repair work is going to change drastically. There will be a larger role for diagnostic skills with respect to electrical vehicles. There would also be a challenge with the informal setup, especially given that these facilities often do not have formal certified skills that would make them eligible for any reskilling program. So what is the way forward? I think it's time that we strategize and plan for this transition with enterprise level intervention and government engagement. The impact on various segments in the automobile sector is not going to be a distant future. This transition is already underfoot in Maharashtra, as we can see. While we do know that the impact on businesses and workforce may not be apparent, immediately apparent to us, but by 2030, we will start experiencing transitional challenges. And it's time that today is the time that we figure out what are the interventions that we could have at the enterprise level and the workforce level. We also would see that while four-wheelers are expected to transition slowly and in a phased manner, the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler markets are transitioning very rapidly and thereby causing the significant market disruption. Thus, a just transition plan for the sector is essential, and it must include progressive government policies and a proactive role for the industry to collaborate and be prepared for how this transition is going to be handled. I believe I'm on time. So with that, I'll close, and I would also invite Mridula to moderate the session.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to this post-lunch session and the post-clapping session as well. I'm Mridula. I'm a manager at the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. We are a philanthropy based in the UK, but we have a large and growing program on climate in India, and some of our partners are here today. For this next session, we have an excellent panel today with us. So can I invite all the panelists to be with us on the dais, please? Starting with Mr. Abhijit Ghorpade, Director, Climate Action Cell, Department of Environment and Climate Change, Maharashtra. Ms. Ashwini Hingne, Associate Program Director, WRI. Ms. Atika Wadhwa, Director, Urban Transition, I4S, we just heard from her. Ms. Kiran Sarkar, Head, Sustainability and Environment, Mahindra Group. And Mr. Rajesh Chavan, Director, Engineering Cluster, Pune and Almec Machining Solutions. Before that, let me also thank Atika for the excellent context-setting presentation. I think in the context of just transition, we've really been hearing from a lot of organizations around how just transition is going to unfold on the energy sector, particularly in coal power and coal mining. But we haven't heard so much on the automobile transition, which is equally unfolding as we talk today. So I think this session is going to deep dive into what's happening on the automobile transition and how does Maharashtra feature into the whole picture, and what is Maharashtra doing, what can Maharashtra do, and what are the lessons that Maharashtra has for other states and other subnational governments. So can I start with you, Mr. Abhijit Ghorpade, in terms of if you could speak about what are some of the initiatives that the state government here in Maharashtra is taking to support a green transition of the automobile sector?
Thank you, Mridula. First of all, let me at the outset thank iForest for inviting me for this panel discussion and very painstakingly putting all this database together and creating a very exhaustive report on just energy transition in Maharashtra, which is the need of the hour. Maharashtra, as you understand, is the most industrialized state in the country, contributing the highest to the national GDP at 14%, the highest to the national industrial output at 15%, and again the highest to the nation's exports in terms of value at 20%. And of course, auto sector, as Atika mentioned in her presentation, is the largest sector of the state economy, contributing highest to the state GDP. So sensing the importance of the auto sector, the state government, and of course, in order to honor the commitment that we have in terms of NDC of realizing net zero by 2070, the state government came out with a landmark policy on electrical vehicles in 2021. The policy is in fact a model in itself. It aims at making Maharashtra an auto hub. So it gives incentives both for the suppliers, that is manufacturers, as well as consumers of electrical vehicles. It aims at, of all the registered vehicles in the state, 10% of vehicles ought to be two-wheelers, 20% three-wheelers, and 5% four-wheelers. But because we are fully aware that the setting up of electrical charging infrastructure could not keep pace with high targets, we are aiming at EV penetration in a very strategic way. So what the policy enables is that 25% of the public transport, including commercial vehicles and municipal transport, would be electric by 2025. And 15% of the state transport buses would go electric. So recently, the State Transport Corporation has started procurement of 5,000 buses. The entire bus fleet of Mumbai will go electric by 2025. Now it is mandatory for all the state government officers to procure only electrical vehicles. The policy provides for setting up charging infrastructure in cooperative housing societies, shopping malls, railway stations, bus stands, public places. 20% of public parking has to be electric. The state provides property tax benefits to the cooperative housing societies, which enable the charging infrastructure. The recently unveiled 702-kilometer long 8-lane mega expressway, the Samruddhi Mahamarg connecting Mumbai and Nagpur, which would reduce the traveling span from 16 hours today to 7 hours, is also conceived as an e-way with electric charging stations dotting along the road. And the Mumbai-Pune expressway and Nasik-Mumbai highway and Pune-Nasik highway are all planned to go electric by 2025. The state government, as our principal secretary mentioned this morning, aims at strengthening the public transport by promoting mass transit. We have launched BRTS in Pune and Nagpur, and we also plan to do the same for the coastal road, which is under construction. The state also came out with a policy of integrated industrial areas and integrated townships. And the basic philosophy is that 60% of the area would be reserved for manufacturing and 40% for social amenities, including housing, recreation, education, so that people can walk to work or cycle to work. They don't really have to travel long distances and increase their carbon footprint. And of course, we are aware that EV transition would take some time, so we are planning to come out with alternative fuel policy in terms of ethanol and other alternative fuels. Now, of course, hydrogen, as it was mentioned in the previous session, is the fuel of the future. So the state has recently come out with a crucial policy on green hydrogen, which aims at about 500 KTPA production capacity and setting up incentivizing electrolyzers production in the days to come. And recently, state also signed crucial MOUs with 7 companies manufacturing hydrogen. So that's it.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the multimodal thinking on how do you green transport in the state. And we heard some of that in the morning today, but thank you for also highlighting that more clearly. I'll go to Ms. Kiran Sarkar now and representing the industry. We heard that Mahindra Electric recently signed an MOU with the government of Maharashtra to invest about 10,000 crores in building EV and EV infrastructure within the state. So we're wondering whether you can throw some light on how Mahindra and other OEMs can support the state government to work together with them to provide the necessary support to workers as this industry transitions towards more and more EVs.
So thanks, Mr. Gorpade, for the elaborate, support which government of Maharashtra is focusing on. We are investing in Maharashtra a lot for our overall EV manufacturing per se, and obviously including the ACM and a lot of other stuff, right? So we have two separate companies for a four-wheeler and for a three-wheeler, that is Mahindra Electric Auto Limited and Last Mile Mobility. Last Mile Mobility contributes to all the three-wheeler manufacturing. If you look at the way the transition Atika explained, right? So three-wheeler transition is happening very rapidly. Currently, LMM, Last Mile Mobility, has 65% market share in EV three-wheeler. So, and another important thing what we have done here is we have impact investors on board ourselves, right? What we're trying to do is when we're trying to manufacturing EV, we are also looking at the infrastructure where we are manufacturing EV. So just to give an example, XV400 is our first EV four-wheeler. That is manufactured with 100% renewable energy in a water positive facility. So what we are looking at is two directional, obviously building a manufacturing infrastructure which is very clearly supporting the EV theme. Even the investors which will be there are the impact investors because they are aligned with our goals and vision. And coming to the skilling and supporting part, right? See how it will happen is, it's at very nascent stage. The skilling is required at different level. First is manufacturing, of course. It starts right from the ITS, colleges, etc. So we are tying up with a lot of ITS to introduce some of the courses where they can learn right from the colleges about the EV infrastructure, etc. Second step is the manufacturing. We have our systematic training infrastructure, we call it as a Gurukul. And under that, we are establishing different training programs, skill building programs, live demos, etc., etc. So that is happening on EV powertrain, etc. So the challenge which is going to be there, as Mr. Gorpade also mentioned, in the EV charging infrastructure, and another challenge is going to be there in the servicing front. So what will happen is, manufacturing will still be okay, that there will be a systematic programs, etc. And one more reason why EV transition is happening slowly in four-wheeler is people are so used to ICE vehicles, right? They know in and out if the vehicle breakdown happens, like where to go, how to do. Typically with EV, obviously people are scared. One is the mileage, that's a different story again, but what happens with the battery, whether it is safe, how the servicing of the battery will happen. So the more skilling is required on the service front. So that is going to be a challenging one, right? Currently what we are doing is, because it's at very nascent stage, obviously what we are doing is we are trying to study global markets where actually the EV transition is there at some countries like around 80%. So we're trying to see how they are doing this entire servicing part, right? And that is going to be a focus area. One more thing which I'd like to add here is what we are also doing is, while we are doing this skilling bit, we are collaborating with governments on different areas. So Dr. Anish Shah is president for FICCI now, and he's driving agenda there on the collaboration with MSMEs and building a skilling program. For our tier 1 suppliers, we are already establishing a program wherein it's not that we are telling them what is sustainability, because that is all Google, it's available on Google, right? What we're trying to tell them is how they can actually contribute and benefit from these opportunities. What are the kind of opportunities that exist? We're trying to start a renewable program for our supply chain so that we can facilitate the programs and they can reduce their energy intensity at their locations. So that's how we want to work with MSMEs on energy efficiency, renewable energy program. And on the skilling front, one last bit, what I wanted to mention is, we are also ensuring the women are also getting skilled in this particular program, because typically there is a mindset, right, ki manufacturing companies, how women will work. So we have a battery line, and battery line is a very systematic job, right, battery pack. So there we have, at this point of time, there are 30% women are already employed on the line and they're already working on the line. And we want to take it forward because we have our ESG commitment where we have said that 1 million women empowerment every year after 2026. And we are working systematically in that direction. So we are just aligning these two, like gender equity and the green jobs.
It's very heartening to see how OEMs are actually actively working towards skilling and thinking about the transition already, and specifically on the gender inclusion angle. I think it's very commendable that OEMs are beginning to think on that direction. So we'll come back to you on just the skilling question once again, but I'll go to Mr. Rajesh Chavan right now. And you've heard about, in the context setting presentations also, that the auto component manufacturers are also going to be affected as a result of the transition. So in your opinion, what do you think will be the supply chain issues that auto component manufacturers will experience as we transition towards more and more EVs?
Well, first of all, thank you, iForest, for inviting me for this panel discussion. Secondly, I would like to tell you that presently the sector in which we work is an MSME sector, especially in Pune, and we are suppliers to tier 2 or tier 1 auto component or automakers. So what we have is like, I mean, mostly what the small and medium industries have are the basic machines and the basic skill set to either to produce the parts or to manufacture the tools. So till date, there has not been much issue about shifting to EV. Though EV is necessary, it's not much of an issue because the transition. I mean, say suppose one part closes down, there are two other parts which are coming up for manufacturing, or they can easily search and find two other parts. So that that vacuum has not been as yet felt. Though as per the policy, this thing, it seems that by 2030 the EV will multiply 7 times, and it is very evident because the number of EVs that we see, or even our friends or colleagues who buy the vehicles, they are normally shifting to EVs. But at the same time, there are a lot of components also coming of EV, which requires most of this activity. However, as you rightly said, it is time that we as SMEs realize that this phase is sooner or later going to come into our life, and we need to have not we means I'm representing the industry. We need to have a more conscious approach towards transiting towards this change sooner or later. So maybe like all these policy decisions Mr. Ghorpade told, or the Mahindra, they told that this is something which is going to come far in a little bit in the future. And we as entrepreneurs, we are not very much aware of what is going to come in the future. So maybe on the government front, if this is made aware to all the SMEs that these things are happening in the industry, and this transition is sooner or later going to come, and you start preparing yourself for this transition. So it will be much easier, so that they are aware of what is going to be in the future, and simultaneously they can either train themselves, they can upskill themselves, they can find some find a mix of components where it is balanced between ICE and EV, or EV, or maybe not only EV but other energy or renewable components. So I think that should be done. That is my opinion.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that, sir. And I do have a follow-up question for you, but I'll finish the panel and come back to you on that one. But let me go to Ms. Ashwini Hingne here and ask her about her experience on having worked with other state governments like the government of Tamil Nadu on a just transition of the automobile sector, with special focus on MSMEs. And sir spoke about how ACMs are typically MSME based. So if you could share some your experience of having worked with Tamil Nadu, and what are the lessons that a state like Maharashtra could learn from there?
Thanks, iForest, for inviting me here. And of course, it's always great to go after a few speakers because some of the things are already on the table. So I'll just start by saying two things. One is the fact that we're talking about MSMEs, right? And all of these large transitions, we're talking about such large shifts in technology. But the fact is that the Indian economy is actually essentially run by MSMEs and a very large workforce that is employed here. which is also again majority is informal, right? So with that at the core, and knowing that any economic shock, be it COVID, be it demonetization, GST, has only impacted MSMEs worse than everyone else. With that at the core, we know that any transition that takes place in any industry is going to make the MSME sector more vulnerable, and therefore we need to proactively think about it. And there are a few key reasons why this shift would essentially impact MSMEs, right? So first is, if we look at the shift that will happen from ICE to EV, essentially we are going from 2,000 parts to 20, and this is so widely quoted that I don't have to explain this further. The second is that as automotive component manufacturers, 60% of the components are actually exported. They exported to markets like Europe and US, both of which now have policy mandates on stopping ICE vehicle supply or sale at like 2030, 2035, which is not so far in the future. The third thing is that there's a lot of vertical integration because of the way the technology shift is happening. So a lot of OEMs are sort of doing R&D, component manufacturing, as well as servicing in-house, which makes the supply chain more compact. And the one thing that was thriving for MSMEs in the traditional ICE sector is the fact that it requires so many parts, and it was such a long value chain from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3. So all of that is going to get disrupted. And finally, if you look at the entire value chain, there are jobs that might go up in certain parts and low in certain parts. So right from R&D, where there'll be more research and development needed because this technology is evolving, to battery manufacturing, to battery recycling as well, there will be jobs created. But jobs will shrink in certain other parts like manufacturing, like servicing, and even charging stations. I mean, most of the charging stations that we already have are not really manned. Like in our complexes and parking lots, you have an app and you just charge. So that disruption will affect, again, the informal workers and the small and medium enterprises. So all these factors, along with the pace of the transition. Now, while India has just started its journey, globally, the EV transition has always been much faster than people have predicted. So every year they say it will grow this much, and it always surpasses it. So the pace of transition is really fast. And spatially also, like in India, we have 3-4 hubs at the most. But with EV being such a compact value chain, you're actually seeing a lot of states getting into EV. So there are EV policies in Telangana and other states which have not traditionally been auto hubs. So it's important for states that have been auto hubs to really plan regionally how to navigate this, because the jobs will need to transition either to the EV sector or other allied sectors. And when we go to the ground in states like Tamil Nadu and even Maharashtra, where the MSMEs have been so comfortable with the existing sector because it's still growing, it's not like it's shrinking. What we see is, like Mr. Chavan said, that there is very little awareness because MSMEs are not looking at 10-year horizons, 2030 and 2070 that we are talking about. They are looking at next quarter, next month, right? So they are not aware of the pace of the transition, what is required of them to make changes. Technology is new, it's still evolving. The existing ICE has very clear standards of quality and everything, which is well established, whereas in EV, there's still underdevelopment. So even if they have to cater to this industry, they don't know, how to benchmark themselves, how to make that happen. And finally, of course, there's skills that are lacking, right from moving from mechanical to electrical to also more software needs to integrate the EV system that we have. But this is, and I'll just end with this, is also an opportunity for more women. And like Kiran just said, this industry has, like any other manufacturing industry in India, has been traditionally dominated by men. And we are already seeing many small manufacturers as well as large companies who are including more women. So that's great. And also this is the first panel with so many women. So I'm even more happy to talk about that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ashwini, for laying that out very, very clearly in terms of the opportunities and how states should already start thinking. I think I want to go back to you, Mr. Chavan, on the points that Ashwini mentioned about how the number of components are going to reduce from 20,000 to, 2,000 to 20. Is that what you said, Ashwini?
2002, yeah.
Yeah, the number of auto component, like the parts are going to
Yes,
shrink. And as Sir pointed out, there are tall targets in terms of fully electric public transport, etc., for the state. And then you also mentioned that there's very little awareness within MSMEs.
Correct.
So what kind of support do you then need from OEMs, from the government in terms of bringing out that awareness, in terms of skilling, reskilling of employees? What do you think are going to be the challenges given this entire context today, and how can the ecosystem support MSMEs in this transition?
So first, I would just like to say that the number of components are definitely going to shrink. But however, there are certain sectors that still require a lot of mechanical components, like the marine sector, the transportation, the heavy transportation. So that will be very less affected, and there the opportunities will, be stable, either be stable or little less affected, maybe not more. Then coming to your second question, that what is the support required? The main support required is from the government government and maybe the OEMs to gather the MSMEs in the specific areas and to make them aware about all these changes that are happening, and not only the changes that are happening, that the government and the OEMs are also shifting their base. So ultimately, that is going to come down to them sooner or later, because as the changes happen on the top, maybe 1 or 2 years down the line, it will definitely affect them. So, and plus, if possible, make small groups of people from the SMEs plus the government plus the OEMs to brainstorm on this issue, how to tackle this problem. Thirdly, then once from this brainstorming, certain points, certain areas come of skilling. Then to make these skills available at cluster levels, there are various cluster levels. Either they are free or they are partially subsidized or at a lesser cost, to train them in new technology like electrical, like she told. That electrical, or even she told that maintenance is an issue, servicing is an issue. So now these opportunities are going to open up. So they are aware that, okay, now since something is going down, something is possibly coming up, then you can start working towards it, so that impact is less felt.
Thank you so much for sharing that sentiment. So actually, I'll pick up on that and go to Ms. Kiran Sarkar on this. So the ACMs feel that, of course, opportunity in one sector might decline, but in other sectors they still continue to remain. You've been investing heavily on three-wheelers and four-wheelers, as you mentioned. So do you think the ACMs currently in the country are geared to meet the kind of requirements that OEMs will have on three-wheelers, electric three-wheelers and four-wheelers? Or do you think some of that requirement has to be met by import? And equally, if you need to develop a domestic industry around supporting the EV industry, what needs to be done in that regard?
Yeah, so two parts, right? One is we're talking about EV, but still, ICE is going to grow, right? So for us, at least by 2030, there will be ICE production will be doubling again by 2030. Even if at 30% market share is EV, still 70% remains ICE, right? So it's not that, so it's very challenging. What is happening currently is there's a lot of work happening on powertrain in India. So battery cells, as you know, everybody is importing, right? But there are local players like Amara Raja, Exide. They're working a lot on the how to develop it in India. So there's a PLI scheme by government, right? So all the OEMs are working towards it. And typically in EV, I think every 6 months things are changing, right? Right from battery chemistry, right from everything is changing. So it's very difficult to say that, how it will change, how soon it will change. But I completely agree that, as Mr. Zawan said, there's a lot of opportunity which is lies, right? And hence, there is a lot of collaboration which is required between OEM, MSMEs, and the government, so that where and how we are going to go in future, and then you can take steps at this point of time. And typically so for example, ICE, how we are doing. So if you ask me for ICE, there is more than 90% parts are coming from India, right? And that will be ultimately a goal for EV as well, because not even if it's not for ACM, but also for OEMs to bring down the price of an EV, it is required. We have to do this, right? Because currently why again the EV is not selling so fast is people think while they're buying EV, right? If my running is more than 1 lakh kilometer, then EV is affordable. Otherwise, I can't buy EV. Very simple mindset, right? So the cost has to come down. If the cost has to come down, then the local development has to happen. So eventually, it will happen because it completely makes economic sense for both OEMs as well as for MSMEs. There's this another part to this, right? So if we have all looked at the solar industry and how it has developed, right? So there are a lot of extended producer responsibility regulations are there now and there are 6 now in last 1.5 years, and on 30th January the extended producer responsibility for end of life vehicles has been notified, right? So what the regulation talks about is they're telling they're telling OEMs as a producer to take back the vehicle. Now this will be another complete different opportunity which is there, right? So OEMs now has to take back the vehicles, recycle it, and then the entire circular economy aspect will come in the picture. So till now we are only restricting ourselves, or even for MSMEs per se we're restricting ourselves only till the manufacturing or till the OEMs. But now the shift is happening because there will be around, as per FICCI's report, there will be around 7 to 8 million tons of waste will be generated every year through end of life of vehicles, right? And now since it will be a regulation which will be maybe in next 60 days it will happen, right? So there is a lot of push now on the after sales or after service. So there is a servicing part because there's entire battery component is there. So battery servicing, battery recycling part, but also now the vehicle recycling part. And just to give an example, at Mahindra, how we are thinking is, we have Mahindra Zero as a recycling facility. So Zero is actually into vehicle recycling. And we have 9 recycling facilities at this point of time with 1,50,000 capacity. We are rapidly increasing it because we see a lot of opportunity now there, right? So now a lot of MSMEs will be again linked to these kind of businesses. So we have to think not only like we are thinking traditionally only in terms of, how I'll produce a component and I'll actually, send it to OEMs and my job is done. It will not happen like that. A lot of disruption will happen even in the end of life of vehicles. So I think there the capability build, the gap what I see currently is this awareness, the capability building, the skilling, and how actually MSMEs can participate in it because it's a huge opportunity. Another thing, if you look at climate change startups or small companies perspective, India has a huge scope. We can go in 10,000s, at least 10,000s, but now we are in hundreds. So there is a lot of scope there to increase that kind of things. There are a lot of patents, everything, but there's not collaborative efforts actually which are happening right now in this direction. So I think that's the gap, and eventually that will happen.
No, it's really good to see industry express some positive sentiments about the transition. So thank you for, again, sharing that positive sentiment about how you're going about this. I'll just turn to Mr. Abhijit Ghorpade once more, sir. You've heard the industry talk about collaboration and coming together. You've been part of various agencies in the state, from the planning board to MIDC and now the Department of Environment and Climate Change. So how important do you think will be this need for interdepartmental coordination also? I mean, while the industry collaborates, how is the government planning to collaborate through various departments to support this transition?
Right. Mrudula, how is the public policy made? Public policy formulation is a collaborative exercise. The policymaker has to factor in all the aspects. He has to consult the stakeholders, the experts. It's not merely a bureaucratic exercise. And I would say the EV policy that we have is a classic example. We formulated a committee of 3 departments. So the GR was issued by the Department of Environment and Climate Change, and the policy was conceived by the Department of Environment. It was a collaborative exercise of 3 departments involved. The Department of Environment, Industries Department, and the Transport Department. Of course, the Department of Environment and Climate Change was more bothered about its environmental implications in terms of reducing the carbon footprint. As you are aware, the transport sector contributes 19% to the carbon emissions, and a bulk of share comes from road transport, almost 60% that effect. The Industries Department was concerned about promoting the supply side, strengthening the supply side, promoting manufacturing, and it came out with the incentive package. You must be aware that in the industrial area that the state has, uh, the area is divided into 5 categories, ranging between category A to category D+, based upon the level of industrial development of the locality. And what the policy does is, irrespective of the area that you invest in, because high incentives accrue to the localities which are least developed, and the least incentives accrue to areas which are most developed. And what this policy does is that it gives the benefit of maximum incentives, that is incentives which apply to D+ category area across the board, across the state, irrespective of the place that you invest in, if you're investing in electrical vehicles. Similarly, the transport department gives subsidies to the consumers, to the purchasers. Now, when it comes to charging, then it is MSCDCL, which is the nodal agency of the energy department. And it should also ensure that maximum energy that we source to electrify the electrical vehicles is clean. Otherwise, that would defeat the very spirit and the purpose of the policy. And then the places in which charging stations are constructed are mostly public places which are under the jurisdiction of the concerned local bodies. If you're planning to set up charging stations along the highway or the expressway, then you have to consult the MSRDC or the PWD. So these various departments come into picture. Lastly, you talked about clean transition, green transition. In order to make it just, we have to look at the occupational structure of the industry. There are 24 OEMs, which are mostly situated in Pune, like places like Chakan or Talegaon and Aurangabad, that is now Sambhajinagar. But there are foundries in places like Kolhapur and Sangli. And as it was mentioned in the presentation, almost 97% of workforce belongs to the MSMEs. So skilling needs to be done for them. And for those involved with OEMs, firstly, the OEMs need to be, ICE OEMs need to be reoriented towards EV. And the workforce needs to be skilled and sometimes upskilled also. And of course, as Kiran mentioned about challenges like the range anxiety and this price anxiety and also time anxiety, because EV comes at high cost, not affordable to common man. And there is also time anxiety because it takes time to charge electrical vehicles. So we need to come out with technological solutions to that, and also policy interventions to make the transition inclusive and comprehensive.
Yeah, no, thank you, sir. Thank you for actually, making it very visual through that policy and bringing in the roles of various departments. And actually, Ms. Ashwini, I'll turn to you on just the policy bit to say that if, therefore, policy interventions are required, then what are those 3 key interventions that will be necessary for the just transition of the auto sector, in your opinion?
Right. I don't have too much to add apart from what sir already said, but I would just turn this around from, this risk of MSMEs and the challenges to how we can view this entire thing as an opportunity. Because I think EV has disrupted the market and will continue to do so, but that also means it's a leveler, right? It means startups can come in, it's not necessarily a playing field for OEMs, established OEMs, ICE OEMs. And not only is it for the state. So I think as governments, it would be very important to sort of develop policies that attract investments, create demand, also in terms of users. And like Mr. Abhijit said, that bringing different state departments together, but also working with the ecosystem, right? So for example, in Tamil Nadu, we've launched and we've started our skilling program in 2 clusters, in Chennai and Coimbatore. And it's not necessarily something we did alone. It's with the government, it's with the MSMEs, it's with ASDC, ARAI, other smaller agencies who've been developing, because this area is really evolving as we speak. So again, looking at models of skilling which will be suited for this fast-paced change. So typically what NSDC's qualification packs are not suitable for MSME workers who will have to leave their job for so many hours. So they will have to be on-the-job training, short-term programs, online programs. So that skilling ecosystem has to evolve, and the government again has a very key role to play. One good example is also, I guess, some states now have, and I think Tamil Nadu, I'm aware for sure, has it, which is a subsidy that is given to MSMEs to skill their workers. So per month, about 4,000 rupees. And there's additional subsidy for skilling that is given for women workers or transgenders or persons with disabilities or of SC or ST. So I think these kinds of measures that then take people along would be very essential. But I just want to reiterate that it's going to be the whole ecosystem, and of course, as government, they have the ability to bring together all these different stakeholders, and that's definitely the way to go for this. Thanks.
Thank you. And now I think,
Mridula,
yes,
can I
Kiran,
just
of course.
add one last point? So even on climate finance, right? So what I've seen at Central, I'm talking about not from Maharashtra perspective also, but we have not seen a lot of much movement in climate finance funding kind of a thing, right? So we have one example wherein Tata Power has done solar rooftop, right? But I think there is a lot of scope there wherein, because typically what happens is when we want to start something with MSMEs or even if say our tier 1 suppliers, so there is a need for initial finance, right? And the things will happen very fast if actually there is a climate finance fund available and it is used in a meaningful manner. So I think there is some need for a stronger policy or even right from a definition, right? What actually we are talking about, what is climate finance means, how it can be used for MSMEs, which sectors, where we can use it. So I don't know, central, state-wise guideline, whatever, but there is, we need something there actually, I think.
Yeah, I actually forgot to mention this, but great point. Because any conversation is a non-starter without finance. And so what we did again as part of our sort of larger exercise and in Tamil Nadu is look at existing schemes. And there are some schemes that are already working really well, like the CGT SME, which really has helped MSMEs make use of credit guarantee at the central level or also state level. But then there are also agencies like SIDBI and others who are now developing sort of products that are catered to clusters. So there could be like 20 MSMEs coming together to access a large pool of finance for a similar technology. So I think those kinds of things would be very useful, apart from, of course, climate finance, which is a maze in itself. So
Yeah, no, thanks actually for bringing that point up. Finances, as you said, always a key, like the most important enabler in any transition. I think lastly, I'll just come to Atika, to you. You set the context for this conversation, so I'll just give you the last word on this to say that, having done all that research on the automobile sector transition in Maharashtra, what are the top 3 recommendations that are arising from your report in terms of the interventions that are needed to make this a just transition?
Sure, thanks, Mridula. I think based on iForest work and what I also hear from the panelists today, we would require intervention on 3 big fronts. One is, I think we need to look at bringing convergence between different policies. We have automobile policy, we have a labor policy and industry policy. So to make sure that we have a robust policy framework for the sector. And secondly, India has already started taking baby steps towards the right to service and right to repair. So we would see more coming there. That is one front on the policy. The second, I believe, is more from, especially for Maharashtra, is the MSME sector. We've seen that about 97% of the enterprises in Maharashtra are either micro or small. And they employ about close to 60% of formal employment, and formal employment which is not covered under any statistics. Maybe it's time that we plan for a funding arrangement to have an MSME transition fund that could actually support reorientation of these enterprises, whether it is meeting the financing need of the training or whether it is meeting, diversifying their businesses in the auto or going outside non-auto sector. And third would be, as I think it's a common, which everybody is talking about, is skilling and reskilling. A lot of effort has to go there. Planning whether you are, and there are multiple alternatives that we could plan. One is on the job training. You could do tie-ups with the vocational institutions. ITIs could get in touch with academic and education institutions. There could be specific EV targeted courses. ASDCs, they have opened up around 25 new EV targeted courses. Or we could also tie up with technology partners. So I believe that these 3 are the major areas of intervention that would be needed.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Atika, for actually coming out with very clear recommendations on how to support this transition. We have about 5 minutes for questions from the audience. If there are any, please put up your hand and can we get a mic?
Um, Good afternoon. Again, I'm Matrika. I'm from IIT Bombay. I'm a PhD scholar there. One critical thing that I just wanted to share is that this huge transition that we are making towards EV, towards renewable energy in general, I think there is going to be, like, particularly when we think about storage, there is going to be a huge demand for critical minerals in terms of lithium, cobalt, etc. And the supply chain of such elements is not necessarily sustainable, because of course there are many social, human impacts that might have. So my question was, like, are there any regulations in place to, I don't know, like, to manage the sustainability of the entire supply chain when we think about moving towards storage? And if not, perhaps, like, considering the perplexity of how complicated this might be in the future, maybe, this is something we need to seriously think about too when it comes to just transition. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for that question. Are you able to take that question, Kiran?
Yeah, so two parts. If you think from an Indian perspective, there is no kind of a regulation. So there is regulation which talks about conflict mineral policy, right? And then OEMs have to take care of, ensure that the material is not sourced from the conflict mineral. So it's not kind of a regulation, but obviously there's a policy which and OECD guidelines are there. Apart from that, a lot of work will happen now in change in battery chemistry. So a lot of things will change now, even if it is lithium, not only in lithium ion, but there will be a change in battery chemistry will happen. So things will change that way. Another thing which is happening, which I spoke about, there is even SEBI is looking after OEMs in terms of business responsibility sustainability report. There is a lot of accountability which OEMs itself have. So like what we have started is, we have started a physical ESG due diligence, because you correctly mentioned there is a lot of social risk in the supply chain for EV coming from battery motors, etc. Right? OEMs have to be very careful when they are onboarding the supply chain. There are a lot of checks and balances that we have to do. And also once you onboard the suppliers, again, we are trying to do an on-site assessment, checking, finding evidence, etc. Also, there are a lot of platforms now available because this you do say like 1 time, 2 times, right? But there are a lot of platforms available which throws a lot of publicly available information, right? So you can have and see what is the kind of a supply chain risk at any point of time, because they provide you how and what is happening with your supply chain. So there are a lot of systems that are available for the checks and balances now.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Great, thank you so much. I'd like to thank all the panelists for their excellent remarks and for really being engaging in this whole conversation. And if you have any follow-up questions, obviously the panelists are still here. Do reach out to them. Thank you.
He's very optimistic. It seems that we are more pessimistic. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yeah, you can't be that. You're a small kid.
I can't
You're a small NGO. A group photo. There's one group photograph. There's one group photo.
No more questions.